Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am super excited about our guest today. She has dedicated her career to making leadership easier and more effective. Her experiences span corporate to entrepreneurial settings. She's a host of her own podcast, Strong Leaders Serve, executive and leadership coach at the Strong Leaders Serve. Please welcome Teri Schmidt. Welcome, Teri.
Thanks, Greg. Really excited to be here.
It's awesome to have you on the show. And as you know, we love to talk about endurance and the endurance mindset. So my question for you, Teri, how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
Yeah, great question, Greg. And, as I was thinking about this, I started by thinking, what does the endurance mindset mean to me? And so I came up with it really is about an intentional choice to regularly work through discomfort toward a meaningful goal. And so as I think about how that has impacted my life unexpectedly, I think back to my journey to an Ironman. I've only completed one full, a couple halves, but that really played into it. It was an intentional choice. Of course, I wanted to do it for myself because I felt like I hadn't stuck with anything in my life, and I saw my husband do it, and I'm like, that is a worthy goal. But it had to be more than that for me because I had two young kids at home. I saw the time that it took him away from those kids. And so when we were training, we actually turned it into a family project. We called it Project Becoming Our Best. And we focused both on our physical well-being, including the kids in our workouts, but also how we were becoming our best people in serving the community. So we added an element of project volunteering, or family volunteering, to that. So that's how it became a meaningful goal for me. And the discomfort, I think, is self-explanatory in that case. But then also, the meaningful goal in the race, if anyone has done Ironman Texas, after they changed the bike course, it's now a two-loop course on a tollway. And so not a very exciting course. But, I use that time to pray for other people. I'm a person of faith, so I would, for a set amount of time, pray for a specific person, then move on to the next person. So in that way, it added some meaning to it as well. And then, currently in my life, the unexpected part, I guess, is that has really flowed into my executive and leadership coaching. In fact, I think I can marry our leadership development model. It's a 3-phase model, but it fits perfectly with the intentional choice, the regularly deal with discomfort, and the meaningful goal, because the model is ground, grow, give, and it starts with grounding yourself in your strengths and values, figuring out what type of leader you want to be, and then growing those skills that need to be developed for you to be the most effective leader. And then probably most importantly, that has an outlet. So the give part, why are you doing this? And I work with so many high achieving, passionate women who want to make an impact, and helping them to walk through those phases takes kind of that overwhelm and that feeling of, I want to make an impact. I want to do good for other people, but there are so many challenges facing me, different personalities, different things that the world is throwing at us. How do I get to that point? And that's really where the endurance mindset comes in.
That's fantastic. There's a lot of little breadcrumbs you left me to ask you questions about, so we'll get into those. Going back to near the beginning, when you were talking about you made the Ironman training a family affair. My wife and I did very similar when we towed the line for Lake Placid 10 years ago, and we started this blog called Triathlon Parents, and we talked about how do you get the balance. And I'm curious with your children, like how has that volunteering continued in their life, like that lesson learned from that race in Texas? How has that path continued for them?
Yeah, it's not just in the activity of volunteering. They do volunteer in their community, but I think more the mindset of there are people in our community who are in need, and we are all going to be in need at some point, and that understanding that we are here to help each other through this. And it isn't about, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is great, but having that community to support you, and I'm guessing your experiences with triathlon would echo, that community part too. But I think having them engage with and learn about the people that they were serving has continued to shift their mindset to the people that they are today.
And then I'm also curious, when they look at other athletes, marathoners, runners, cyclists on their own, do they compare it to Ironman? So I remember a story keeps coming up in my mind of we were at my wife and I were at Marine Corps Marathon many years ago, and we're supporting the runners going by, and we're holding our youngest in our arms, and she goes, "Well, Dad, when did they do their swim and their bike?" And it just kind of put things back into perspective of like what we show our children and the lens they see through. Any sort of fun stories that have come through your endurance training, your Ironman training through the eyes of your children?
Yeah, I think it is just that mindset, and I hate to use the tagline, but that anything is possible. They have seen us do it, but then also we had an opportunity to run one of the aid stations for several years after that at Ironman Texas, and they saw everyone from the pros coming through very early to those who were the last people through our aid station, and they were able to see with consistent training and the ability to deal with that discomfort and the ability to have a why for why you were doing it, the great accomplishments you can make regardless of your starting point. And so they are, both involved in sports and other activities. And I think that has continued to carry them through that with consistent effort, they can accomplish whatever they want to accomplish.
That's awesome. So jumping forward to the work that you do now, working with leading female executives, how does this intentional discomfort come into play when you're working with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the intention piece. One of the reasons I got into executive and leadership coaching is that I saw so many women that I could spot their strengths. I could see the impact that they could have, but they weren't seeing them for themselves sometimes. And because of that, they were either trying to mimic other people or doing things that were, in a sense, leading to burnout because they weren't necessarily aligned with who they were as leaders. And so that intentional piece, again, getting to kind of our ground phase, that first phase of our leadership development model of knowing who you are and what your strengths are has had an incredible impact. I had one woman I coached who said, now that I see that my directness is not something that I have to shy away from, but I can use it effectively with my team, I feel liberated. All of a sudden, I'm not trying to be someone else. I'm being myself and using it in an effective way, and my team is noticing. And, that has just been wonderful to see women who are high achieving already, trying to figure it all out themselves. I've been there. But then to be able to walk side by side them to help them gain some new awareness that helps them be more effective in their work so that they can reach their goals and that their team can also have success has been wonderful. The discomfort, comes from, I think that's just provided day to day. We have to deal with people that aren't the same as us, who have different viewpoints as us, who, may have some growth areas that, in a sense, maybe rub us the wrong way. And the world is always changing, like our VUCA world, our volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, that provides enough discomfort for itself. And I think when the women are grounded in who they are, they can, instead of having those experiences, those uncomfortable experiences kind of wear on them, they can, in a sense, learn and grow through them because they have that grounding.
So give me an example. We've got an audience member who isn't grounded in themselves at
Mm-hmm.
the moment, right? What is an indicator for somebody to say, hey, or to step back and to sort of self-examine, become a little bit more aware? What are what's an indicator that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I think, a lot goes to kind of the internal stress that you're feeling that comes from not being aligned. And so if you're doing something that just doesn't feel right, and again, that's going to take a little bit of effort in that you do have to take some time to step back and kind of look at the big picture instead of just going, and sense in your body and look at patterns over time of how this acting this way just didn't feel right. And that is a lot easier to do when you're talking with someone else, whether that be a coach, a mentor, a trusted colleague, because they can sometimes see where you are maybe out of alignment or, are struggling in ways that maybe you can't. Maybe you think it's just a result of the situation and you just have to power through it. When in reality, if you had that awareness, it wouldn't be so much powering through it. It would be falling back on who you are and finding a way to navigate it using those strengths.
Certainly. And I'm asking these questions for selfish reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm married to one of those very powerful female executives who recently was promoted to the CEO of her business.
Mm.
And I give her a lot of credit for the journey she's on. So I'm curious with my mindset in one direction, and I've watched my wife like progress over her career. Teri, I'm curious of how that your coaching changes as that executive progresses through her career, from sort of the starting job out of college until you
Mm-hmm.
ultimately get into the CEO role. How does your coaching change and your advice to her sort of change over time?
Yeah, I say our leadership development model is kind of like a spiral staircase, and that you don't, complete the ground phase and you're done. You never have to go through it again. Instead, you're going through ground, grow, give, repeatedly. And I would say what changes between the new leaders that we work with and the more executive, more senior leaders is really, what are those uncomfortable situations that you have to deal with that help you grow. So the nature of the situation that they face is what changes. And so where you have, for example, a new leader who may be dealing with, one of the most common challenges for new leaders, particularly those who are promoted within, they're leaving their peers and maybe they're leading their peers now. How do I deal with that relationship change? How do I deal with, in a sense, that loss that I'm feeling because I don't have these friendships anymore necessarily in the same way? Instead, I have to be their leader. And how do I use who I am and define who I am and share who I am to lead them effectively? That might be an example of what a new leader might be facing. Whereas with an executive I coached, for example, hers was more about, how do I address the feedback that my CEO is giving me or that my team is giving me, that, I need to be more direct and, people should leave a meeting disagreeing with me, was one piece of feedback that an executive I was working with got. More around, how do I lead in a way that seems more executive-ish, and still be true to myself. And also, I'm not aware of what's happening on the front line anymore. I may be 3 or 4 levels up or even more from that front line. How do I get the information that I need to make decisions and create a safe environment so that people, even though I have this position, feel comfortable providing me feedback, providing me ideas. So definitely a shift in the challenges that are faced, but not necessarily a change in how we coach them through those.
That's very insightful. You left me another breadcrumb there when you're talking about having to be their leader. So you've been promoted into a new role and now you have to be their leader. I'd love your perspective on the difference between how to become their leader versus just leading, if that makes any sense, right? Much of, in my opinion, leadership skills, sort of like you out there and you're leading and people will follow you, is one set of leadership. But the other one is, hey, you've just been tasked to lead a group who might not want to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts or commentary around the differences between those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first situation you're talking about, it's not uncomfortable. It's very comfortable. You're out there just doing your job, and people are drawn to that. And so you in that situation are very comfortable and feel like you're being yourself and being your best self and aren't really concerned about the people necessarily that are following. It's just something that kind of happens, as opposed to when you are their leader or you are their manager, supervisor, you have a responsibility for their performance. And because of that, you do have to pay attention to them, obviously, more so than you would if you were just kind of leading by example and happen to fall into that role. So that requires so many more skills, whether it be building trust, setting clear expectations, being able to provide feedback that helps them to accomplish and achieve those expectations, and paying attention to what their strengths are and what motivates them. So you're much more so, I like to use the analogy of a gardener, who is making sure that the environment is right for their growth and for them to be able to perform and produce, or kind of a, orchestra director. You're much so, your focus is much more so on those who you are leading, as opposed to in that first situation where your focus is solely on you and your performance.
I love that analogy about the gardener. Teri, shifting gears on you slightly, you mentioned earlier you saw you had a passion into coaching. What were you doing prior? Give us a little bit of background on you and how you got into what you're doing today.
Yeah, definitely. So I, coached throughout my corporate career. Much of my corporate career was spent at JetBlue Airways, which was an excellent organization to work with. Was able to lead different teams there, and really always enjoyed the coaching component of my leadership role the most there. After that, actually, as we trained for the Ironman and had that family project, that kind of developed and grew on its own. And we had schools who wanted to bring in programs that were combining the fitness and the volunteering. And so I started a nonprofit called Stronger to Serve, which did that for families, organized opportunities for them to get active and volunteer together. So we had a running club called Run Kind, where we would run or walk for 45 minutes and then do a volunteering project right on site. So we did that for about 5 years. And then I was just really hungering to, again, work with professionals in the corporate environment again. And so went back to what I loved the most about my leadership position and got into the executive and leadership coaching. And that's where we are now.
So I'm curious from the entrepreneur perspective, how is it being on the other side of, working in a business, doing executive coaching, and kind of the paychecks get written and the accounting gets done and the HR function happens, to now running your own organization? Give us a sense of how that journey's gone.
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely challenging. We talk about that discomfort. You go from having a team and leading a team who, you kind of set the vision, come up with the ideas, but you have people to bounce ideas off of. You have people to execute on tasks. You have people who have strengths that you don't have that can kind of partner with you to get things done most effectively. to being currently I'm a solopreneur, so it's in a sense just me. And it's been a definite learning journey, and a lot of growth. And as I think about Ground, Grow, Give, definitely a whole nother spiral of that, in that when you are the only person doing something and you are the person that is out there building relationships so that you can serve the people that need your services, it is a whole another level of self-examination and coming to know yourself, and being comfortable in your own skin, so that you can serve them most effectively. So I definitely not without its challenges. I loved a challenge, so it fits right in with my personality, but definitely ups and downs, and you don't have that security of a paycheck, like you said. So that is always in the back of your mind, and for me, it's always keeping the focus on who is out there who could benefit from my services, and how can I help get them to the next level in their career, in their leadership, and less about worrying about where the money is going to come from.
Yeah, I find that if you lead with your intention and what you want to, your passion, many of the other things sort of fall in place. So I got to ask this question: who does benefit from your services? Who, like, somebody's in the audience thinking about, hey, I should reach out to
Mm-hmm.
Teri. What is that person struggling with? Give us a sense of how that journey can manifest.
Yeah, definitely. I work with primarily women leaders, and primarily those who are high achieving, who are eager to make an impact, and who have a focus on leadership being, and our definition of leadership is courageously using your talents to make a way for others to courageously use theirs. So the women
Mm,
that really succeed in our programs and with coaching come from that mindset. Leadership is not about gaining more titles or status or power, except if it's, power to support others in reaching their goals. And so women who have that mindset generally are those who benefit the most from my coaching. In terms of levels, I have a heart for new and mid-level leaders because they don't get as much support usually, but also love to work with executives and some of the unique challenges that they face, particularly as they're getting to those higher levels where there might not be as many examples of female leaders around them
mm.
that they can pull from. And, I would just say I've experienced the power of coaching myself, in that, I could be working on something in my mind for months, and then I talk to a coach in a 50-minute session, and we've got through it. So it gets back to that, supportive community, and how, although particularly as high achieving women, we like to do it all ourselves. There is so much value in seeking out support from others, and it just really accelerates your transformation from, being overwhelmed and burnt out into having that impact that you're in leadership to have.
Yeah, there's something special around coaching, and I'm a huge fan. I've worked with my executive coach for probably 15 years. I've got triathlon coach. I've got, like, everything in my
Mm-hmm.
life has some sort of coach. But you're right. I mean, the accountability, the power that brings together. You can unpack something that you've been struggling with for many, many months in a 50-minute conversation.
Yeah, it's
Um,
amazing.
Teri, I asked you a similar, I guess, a slightly different question around endurance leadership. Like, one of the habits I find in endurance leadership is striking the right balance.
Mm-hmm.
How does that come up into conversations that you have with your clients? Like, the striking the right balance between work and life and community. Talk to us about that aspect of your coaching.
Yeah, there are a couple of ways that comes into play. One being, with regards to the word serve. So our business is called Strong Leaders Serve, and sometimes women who I work with who have that definition of leadership that I just talked about may get into almost overextending themselves, and may think that they are serving their team members, or the leaders that they are leading by jumping in and rescuing instead of serving. So I talk about, strong leaders should serve, they shouldn't rescue. And what I mean by that is, if someone is struggling, yes, it might be quicker just to do the task for them. But in reality, that's going to add a whole lot more time and stress to your schedule as the leader, because they are going to be dependent on you to do that task, and then they are not growing. So instead, can you spend that 90 minutes or even 45 minutes to help them to be able to be more equipped to do that task? So that's one way that leaders, I find, once they have that shift in perspective, are more likely to have balance in their lives and not overextend themselves. And the other way is, it can be really difficult, particularly for high achieving women, particularly for women who are parents as well, to say no. And so the work that we do in that ground phase of really defining your values, and I have heard once somewhere, and I can't remember, I apologize, I can't source it, but it was that priorities are values in action. So helping women to really get crystal clear about what their values are and what their resulting priorities are can help them to set boundaries and achieve that balance that they are seeking.
So taking that one step further in defining values, can you give us an example of when a person doesn't have their values defined and what that could lead into?
Yeah, definitely. So let's say that, someone has a situation where they are just really seeking the approval of others, and really seeking to kind of climb that ladder, the corporate ladder, and constantly seeking approval and the next kudos in a sense. That word is coming to me through Strava, but that could lead to a situation where, although maybe family is, a primary value for them, they are choosing to do everything they can to, work late at night, to miss their kids' events, to, just make a lot of sacrifices on the home front, because they are seeking something that is not necessarily aligned with their values, but is aligned with maybe what society is telling them that they need to be doing. If you are a high achieving person, you get up to the C-suite as fast as possible, and this is what it takes. So for some women, that may be perfectly aligned with their values, but if it isn't, it's going to cause a lot of stress, a lot of angst, and can lead to burnout as well.
Certainly. And I suspect that also varies based on time, right? I could see situations in which you say to yourself, you know what, my long-term value is X, and I'm willing to do Y, which is maybe uncomfortable or outside of your value spectrum for a given period of time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like training for a big race, right? You're not going to be dedicating that time to that particular goal forever, but you have worked through how you can stay in alignment long-term with your values while making this short-term sacrifice.
100%. Teri, how can an audience member get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. They can find me, Teri Schmidt, and would also love to have them listen to the Strong Leaders Serve podcast. I have some amazing guests coming up. Also do some solo episodes so they can get to know a little bit more about my approach, my beliefs, and hopefully it will serve them in their leadership.
Fantastic. And we'll include those in our show notes for sure. Terry, any parting words for the budding female entrepreneur out there who's starting her journey?
Yeah, I think just, seek out support. Even though it might be against your natural inclination, find a way to both give and receive from the community that supports you.
Awesome. And then I have to ask the question, would you also put in there, or let me ask you a different question. Around setting goals that are outside of your career. So for me, right, one of the reasons I love doing Ironman
Mhm.
races is it distracts me and motivates me in different ways. Do you see that as a powerful tool, part of sort of goal setting and achievement?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think of course you don't want to overload yourself with goals, but I think as much variety as you can get in there, you can learn so much from different things that seem completely unrelated when you are working toward goals that are outside of your regular work goals.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Terry, thank you for being on our show today. Audience members, if you got some value, please like the show, please subscribe, share Terry's message with your community, your friends and family. I really enjoyed getting into the conversation and hearing you say priorities are values in action. That is 100% the case. And we're talking around striking the right balance. Again, thank you for the work that you're doing. Those out there who are thinking about coaching, reach out to Terry. It's a powerful tool and it will propel you into things that you want to achieve in your life. Terry, thanks again for being on our show.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Greg.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits